I bought a pleasure slave on the black market, but she whispered I was a princess once. Corvin Vale had sworn he'd never walk these corridors again, but forgotten places have a way of remembering those who tried to leave them behind. Level C-29 smelled of coolant and metal fatigue. The walls, once polished chrome, were now scratched, flaking at the seams. A leaking air duct dripped something oily near a cracked league insignia. 3 rings entwined, dulled to the color of tarnished memory. Once the fate of 3 empires had been decided in this corridor. Now it housed rust. Corvin moved quietly, the dull tread of his boots swallowed by the stale, recycled air. He held his ID tablet in one hand and a flashlight in the other, its beam flickering with the same indecision he felt in his chest. The maintenance alert had pinged near sub-access Delta 7. Low priority, unauthorized energy variance, likely sensor drift. Still, protocol demanded a visual sweep, and down here, protocols were all he had left. Most of the time, this level stayed quiet. Too far from the trade decks, too degraded for high-clearance staff. The perfect place to lose things. Or people. He turned a corner. The flashlight stuttered, then caught on something that didn't belong. Silk, ceremonial, torn, draped across a figure slumped against an old diplomatic cargo crate. She sat upright, posture carefully arranged, as if taught to be beautiful even while discarded. Long white hair, braided down her back in intricate coils, shimmered in the artificial light. Her skin was a deep, cool green, smooth and almost translucent near the edges of her cheekbones. But the bruises bloomed dark beneath her collarbone, disappearing beneath fabric not meant for warmth. A metal ring sat flush against her throat, polished, intact, a pleasure slave's tag. The design wasn't commercial, no registration code, no auction branding, but etched faintly into the collar's rim, he saw it, a crest, an ancient one, barely visible. Not from any merchant house, something older. Royalty. Her eyes opened slowly, silver gray, with vertical pupils that contracted against his light. She didn't flinch. "Please," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "If they see you speak to me, they'll raise my price again." Corvin froze, not from fear, from recognition. That voice didn't plead, it instructed, as if she was trained to say it, soft enough to earn pity, practiced enough to carry no hope. He crouched carefully just outside arm's reach, the flashlight lowering. "What's your name?" Her gaze found his, steady and distant. She studied him, not like someone assessing danger, but like someone measuring the worth of being noticed. "I was a princess." Once it didn't sound like a lie. It sounded like the only truth she had left. Corvin didn't move, didn't answer right away. Instead, a memory rose in him, unbidden, a tribunal room flooded with golden light, a girl no older than 14 seated beside a trade baron 3 times her age, a negotiation, a refusal, his refusal, and the silence that followed, the silence of being erased. He'd been a man of principles once. That man had died somewhere between the scandal and the reassignment orders that banished him to archive duty. But this wasn't a leak or a protest. This was flesh and blood. And she was sitting in a forgotten corridor like a broken ornament someone had tried to hide, not discard. He saw it now. A small glow, almost hidden beneath the curve of her hip, an implanted node powered down but still faintly warm. A tracker, meant to look dead. Whoever left her here hadn't lost her. They'd placed her. Corvin reached up slowly and slipped off his jacket. "You're freezing." "I'm not allowed to accept gifts. It implies value." Her voice didn't waver, but her shoulders did. "They punish that. This isn't a gift. It's mine. I'm cold." She blinked once, then slowly, painfully extended a hand. Her fingers trembled, but not from weakness, from restraint. She moved like someone who had been taught to hide pain with poise. When her fingers brushed the fabric, she inhaled too sharply. The contact startled her, not from him, but from the ghost of every hand before his. Still, she took the jacket. It swallowed her frame, draping awkwardly over the silks. She didn't try to adjust it. She just held it closed, jaw tight, as if waiting for him to change. He didn't. Instead, he sat, not too close, not facing her fully, just near enough to matter. "You can come with me," he said. "There's a storeroom. Quiet. No cameras. I don't have clearance. I won't ask for yours." Her eyes narrowed, not with suspicion, but fatigue. No one does this without wanting something. Corvin exhaled through his nose. He almost laughed, but it felt wrong in this place. "Then assume I'm selfish. Assume I just don't want to leave you here." "Why?" "Because I left someone before," he almost said. "Because I let them turn a girl into currency, and I lived." But instead he offered the smallest smile. "Then let's pretend, just for a while, that I'm your subject, and you're safe." She didn't nod, not right away, but she stood, and when she followed him into the darkness of the corridor, the silence that walked beside them wasn't fear. It was choice. Corvin knew in that moment what he'd just done. He'd stepped off the path that kept his head down, broken the rules he'd clung to like penance. There was no walking away from this. Not now. Not from her. The door to Corvin's quarters closed with a soft hiss behind them, sealing out the cold breath of the lower corridors. Inside, the air was warmer, but stale, tinged with metal, ozone, and something faintly musty, like forgotten paper and sleep. He stepped aside so she wouldn't feel cornered. No sudden movements, no orders, just space. The woman stood still in the entranceway, the sleeves of his jacket hanging past her fingertips. Underneath, silk clung to her body in wrinkled folds. It looked ceremonial but worn thin by time. Blood had once been washed from it, imperfectly. A faint rust-colored stain clung to the edge near her thigh. Her feet were bare. She didn't speak, but her eyes moved slowly, scanning the room, memorizing exits. No part of her posture betrayed ease. Her back remained too straight, her neck too poised, like someone who'd been taught she was always being watched, even in a place no one had looked at in years. Corvin moved carefully, setting down his ID tablet and flashlight. He didn't try to sit, didn't get between her and the door. "This used to be a document storage cell," he said, his voice low. "They sealed it off after a leak compromised most of the magnetic housing. I rerouted some power, installed blockers. It's off-grid." She didn't respond. Her eyes landed briefly on a dim red glow from the corner, a jamming device blinking in quiet rhythm. He saw the calculation behind her stillness. She was waiting to be told what came next. Her training ran deep. "I don't want anything from you," he said. "You're safe here, as safe as this place allows." Still nothing. Her hands clutched the front of the jacket, sleeves bunched in her fists. Corvin crossed to the reheat unit built into the wall. The options were minimal. Nutrient broth, ration paste, but he had a small stash tucked behind the panel. Things he'd kept for himself: a half-decent sachet of spiced lentils, a sealed rice tray, a cinnamon protein biscuit. They'd cost him more than his last month's pay. At the time, he hadn't known why he'd kept them. Now he did. He loaded the stew and tapped the heat cycle. The quiet hum of warming circuits filled the silence. "Do you eat warm food?" he asked, not looking back. There was a pause, then, "Not often." Her voice was quieter now, hoarse at the edges. "Where I'm from," she added after a moment, "temperature implied chaos. We were taught to eat everything cooled, measured, controlled." The machine dinged. He set the steaming bowl on the table, along with the spoon. The scent of garlic and cumin mingled with starch and slow spice. It filled the tiny room like a balm. She didn't move. "You can sit," Corvin said gently. She crossed the floor slowly, barefoot steps silent on the metal tiles. When she reached the chair, she didn't collapse into it. She folded, spine straight, chin level. She glanced at the bowl as though it were a test. The first bite trembled in her hand. She lifted the spoon to her lips, tasted, and paused. He saw it, the flicker of memory behind her eyes, something she hadn't let herself feel in a long time. She took another bite, and another, faster this time. Halfway through the bowl, she choked slightly, coughed, and froze as if she expected punishment. Corvin was already holding out a cup of water. She stared at it for a breath before taking it with both hands. "Thank you," she whispered. "You don't have to thank me." The only thing I'm allowed to say freely. The weight in those words hit harder than any scream. He sat across from her, keeping his distance. Your accent, he said. It's not from the frontier rings? Number Saralathi Core, fourth orbit. He remembered that name, barely. A formal world, decorative, genetic lineages traced for beauty, not strength. A society where grace was taught as doctrine, where daughters were currency and posture was law. He wondered how many others had ever looked at her and seen a person. You said you were a princess, he murmured. She didn't look at him. I was born into line black of House Narration, she said. It was a high-blooded ceremonial caste. We didn't rule, we were displayed. Our duty was aesthetic resonance, harmony, presence, posture, scent modulation, emotional balance. She listed them like items on a report. When our house fell out of favor, we were recategorized. Line black was declared unstable. The males were executed. The rest of us were redistributed. Corvin swallowed hard. He wanted to ask how many times she'd been sold, how many ships, how many rooms. But he didn't. He already knew the answer wouldn't matter the way people expected it to. Someone placed you here, he said instead. You weren't lost. A slight shift in her shoulders. Not confirmation, but not denial either. I found a tracker on you, he added. Dead, but not disabled. I know. Why leave it active? So someone else would find me, not them. She looked up then. Her eyes were sharp, not pleading, not hopeful, just watchful. You're not asking why. I don't need to. That's strange. I'm not here to interrogate you or fix you, just to keep you out of reach. For now. She lowered her gaze. After a moment, she whispered, My last owner called me a whisper skin relic, said I wasn't good for pleasure anymore, but good enough to trigger a bidding war among the nostalgic. Corvin closed his eyes briefly. The words lodged in his throat like stone. You're not property, he said quietly. On Saralathi, no one is, and everyone is. She finished the stew slowly, more carefully now. When she set the spoon down, her hands remained wrapped around the bowl. You can rest, Corvin said, rising. The bed's yours. She didn't move. I'm trained to share sleeping quarters, she said. Not as offer, not as invitation, just information, as if she expected rejection to come next. You don't have to be trained tonight, he said. No one's expecting anything from you. Not here. He spread a blanket on the floor for himself. She stood slowly and moved to the bed. Lay down facing the wall, his jacket still wrapped around her like armor. She didn't sleep at first, he could tell. Her breathing stayed shallow, uneven, her muscles too tight. Then finally he heard the shift. A long exhale, her hands unclenched. Stillness. Corvin lay on the floor, staring at the cracked ceiling tiles, listening to the station's old lungs wheeze and hum around them. He should report this. He should turn her in. He wouldn't, and the part of him that still cared about rules, about survival, knew it. Whatever she was, whoever she had been, she wasn't just some relic. She was a match, and he had just struck her against the edge of the fire. Corvin woke to silence, not the usual mechanical hum of the station's air recyclers or the hollow hiss of old ducks, but the kind of silence that made you listen harder because something had shifted. He opened his eyes slowly. The bunk was empty. He sat up, blanket falling away from his chest. His neck ached from the cold floor and a dream he couldn't quite remember, only the feeling it left behind. Regret, maybe. The kind that had no shape but stayed in the bones. The faint light in the corner of the room showed movement. She was standing near the basin, his jacket still wrapped around her, sleeves rolled up now. Her long white hair fell over her back like a curtain of light. She was washing her hands carefully, like each motion carried its own meaning, as if it was something she had to remember how to do. Her fingers lingered under the water longer than needed. Corvin rose but kept his voice low. You all right? She didn't startle, just looked at him over her shoulder, face unreadable. I dreamed I was made of glass, she said, and someone kept polishing me over and over until I disappeared. He didn't answer. Some dreams deserve silence. She turned back to the basin. I'm not used to waking up without commands. I'm not used to waking up with someone in my room, he said. A faint shadow of a smile touched her lips, too quick to hold. He reached for the food pack stashed behind the console and pulled out a sealed biscuit. Want something sweet? She hesitated, then nodded once. Corvin unwrapped it and placed it on a napkin. She took it gently, like it might break, and sat on the edge of the bunk. This is spiced, she said after a bite. Cassia? Close. Synth cinnamon. You'd think for the price they'd use the real thing. I don't remember what real spice tastes like. He watched her chew, slowly, deliberately. Her eyes didn't wander. She looked at the food the way someone might look at a map, trying to understand what it once led to. You remember a lot, though, he said. She glanced up. The way you sit, how you speak. It's still there. You didn't lose who you were. Her expression hardened just slightly. I didn't keep it. They trained it into me. Saralathi elegance isn't a gift. It's an imposition. Every movement you make has a metric. Angle of the wrist, blink interval, even the way you breathe. She lifted her hand and flexed her fingers. When I was 6, they lasered calluses off my feet and stitched my bones straighter. I wasn't allowed to weep afterward. That was considered inelegant. Corvin felt something in his chest twist. Not pity, something deeper, more shameful. The sick recognition of a system he'd once helped uphold. You were meant to be admired, he said. No, she corrected softly. I was meant to be owned. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It pressed in. He sat down across from her, legs crossed. I worked treaties once, cultural ethics, refugee protocols. You were a negotiator. I was supposed to protect the innocent, keep the lines from bleeding too far. And I failed. She didn't interrupt. There was a union request, he continued, a merger between the Arstan Combine and the League. They needed a bloodline bond. The Combine offered a noble girl, 14. I refused to sign, raised concerns, filed objections. He didn't raise his voice, didn't dramatize the words, but his jaw tensed. 2 weeks later, the girl was married. My name was erased from the commission. Leaked documents, disgraced, exiled to this level. Nerys didn't respond right away. She set the biscuit aside and drew her legs up onto the bunk, arms around her knees. Was she like me? She asked. He nodded. That's why you helped me. Corvin met her eyes. That's not the only reason. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then she shifted, subtle, tentative, and rested her bare feet on the floor again. She tilted forward, elbows on knees, hands knotted together. I don't know how to trust you, she admitted. I want to, but that want feels like a defect. It's not. I keep waiting for the moment you change, for the mask to slip. If it does, he said, you'll know, and you'll still be in control. She studied him, not with suspicion, but with aching caution, like someone who'd been burned so often she no longer believed in firelight. I was reprogrammed to please, she said, to match moods, adapt, anticipate need. Even now I'm watching your face, measuring tone. That instinct doesn't stop just because I want it to. You don't have to stop it, Corvin said. You just don't have to use it for me. Her lip trembled then, not visibly, but enough for him to notice, enough to make her look away. Why do you believe me? She whispered. You don't even know my real name. I don't need to know your name to believe you. You should. I will, he said, when you're ready to give it. That silence again, but this time it wasn't defensive. It was thoughtful, a space being made. Then she said quietly, Nerys is not my designation. It was the name of my line, but it's the only name I remember choosing to speak aloud. Then Nerys is what I'll call you. She nodded once. Corvin stood. The room felt heavier now, but not darker, like something had been unearthed. Not everything, but enough to breathe. Do you want a shower? He asked. There's warm water, not much, but enough. Her gaze flicked toward the washroom door, then back to him. Will you watch me? No. That single word seemed to land harder than anything else he'd said all day. She rose, walked to the washroom. closed the door behind her, not slowly, not nervously, but with measured control. The faint sound of water running reached his ears, and Corvin sat down on the floor, back against the wall, and let out the breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. She had given him a name. He had given her space. And for the first time since this whole thing began, he believed there might be more waiting on the other side of silence. The water had gone cold by the time Neri stepped out of the tiny washroom. Corvin didn't look up immediately. He was seated cross-legged on the floor, tuning a handheld frequency scrambler with a makeshift stylus and a half-burned diagnostic node. It was an old trick: crack the broadcast pulse and fake a room-wide sensor outage. Not foolproof, but it bought time. She stood in the doorway for a few seconds, her posture looser now, her hair damp and braided down her shoulder. A thermal towel was wrapped around her frame, and beneath it she wore one of his spare shirts. It was several sizes too big, but clean. "Hot water," she said quietly. "That felt like a memory I didn't know I had." Corvin smiled faintly without looking up. "Had to redirect the heat exchange from the wall panel. It's only good for a few minutes at a time." That was more than enough. She stepped into the room and the door sealed behind her with a muted hiss. Her steps were slower, but not from pain. She wasn't walking like someone bracing for violence anymore. The silence between them had shifted. It wasn't guarded. It was shared. "You've modified this room a lot," she said, gesturing toward the tangle of wires and improvised shielding. "None of this is standard issue. I never trusted the official installations. Every system on this station has at least 3 back doors: surveillance, audio bleed, biometric relays. I disconnected the primary uplink on day 3. Paranoid? Pragmatic." Nerea sat on the edge of the bunk, arms wrapped loosely around her knees. "You said you worked for the League once, as an ethics negotiator. Why did you stay after they burned you?" He looked up at her then, not surprised, just tired in that quiet, permanent way grief settles behind the ribs. "Because I thought disappearing would mean I agreed with what they did. I couldn't change the system, but I refused to walk away from the ruins. That's not survival, that's punishment." "Maybe," he said, "but it was my choice." She tilted her head slightly. "You still carry it, don't you? That failure." "It's the only honest part of me that survived the trial." Silence again, but it wasn't heavy. She seemed to weigh his words, not with suspicion, but with the careful respect of someone used to lies and learning to believe something else. Corvin set the tool down and leaned back against the wall, stretching out his legs. "Your name, Nerace, you said it was a line name. What was your given one?" She was quiet for a moment. Her fingers traced the seam on the bunk's edge, as if the act of touch might help her pull the memory loose. "I had one," she said finally, "before the reclassification, before the neural conditioning. But they made me forget it. They taught me how to answer to silence, then to numbers, then to instructions. Nerice was what the handlers called me during training because I stood too straight to break." "That sounds like something to be proud of." She shook her head. "Number. It was just another reason I fetched a higher bid." Corvin's throat tightened. He hated how normalized she sounded when talking about herself as a product, like worth had always been something external. "Do you want to find your name again?" he asked. "I don't know," she whispered. "Sometimes I wonder if I've already outlived it." He wanted to reach out, just place a hand over hers, but he didn't. Instead, he said, "That name doesn't have to be who you were. It can be who you're becoming." A long silence passed between them. Then she stood slowly and walked toward him, not like a performer on a stage, but like a person making a choice. She stopped just close enough that her knees brushed the edge of his foot. "Can I sit beside you?" He nodded. She lowered herself onto the floor next to him, the oversized shirt slipping down one shoulder. She didn't adjust it. She just rested her hands in her lap and let the silence settle again. Corvin didn't move. He didn't want to break whatever fragile permission had just been given. "I used to dream about rooms like this," she said softly. "Not beautiful, not ornate, just quiet, with walls that didn't watch, where I didn't have to earn the air I breathed." "This isn't much of a sanctuary," he replied. She looked around the room, worn surfaces, exposed wiring, flickering panel in the corner. It is to me. Her hand drifted to her thigh. She pressed gently and winced. Corvin noticed. Are you hurt? Not fresh. Old damage. They made us kneel a lot. Stone floors, no padding. It wasn't punishment. It was refinement. Without thinking, he reached toward her leg, then stopped halfway. Her eyes flicked to his hand. It's all right, she said. So he let his fingers graze the fabric over her knee. Just barely. Not a gesture of comfort. Not rescue. Just presence. Contact without demand. She didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned her shoulder gently against his. It was the first time she touched him without flinching. I keep thinking this will end, she said. That someone will open that door. That I'll be taken again. Reset. But the longer I sit here, the less real that fear feels. Corvin tilted his head slightly so it rested against hers. It might still happen, he said, but not tonight, and not while I'm breathing. She let out a breath that wasn't quite a sigh. Her eyes closed. They sat that way for a long time, quiet and unremarkable, but real. When she finally spoke again, her voice was barely audible. I think I was called Sarah, before. Corvin didn't react, didn't praise or question. He simply said, Then I'm glad to meet you, Sarah. Her fingers brushed his hand, light as a feather, and stayed. The station lights dimmed without warning. Almera 6 unreliable cycle control stuttering again, caught in one of its half-hearted attempts to mimic day and night. In the darkened hush that followed, Sarah reached for Corvin's hand without thinking. It was instinct, a whisper of fear, old but not forgotten, and it made him still. They were seated shoulder to shoulder on the floor, backs against the wall, their bodies not quite touching until now. The brief brush of her palm against his skin felt deliberate in its simplicity, fragile but not uncertain. She didn't pull away. Instead, she whispered, I never thought silence could feel safe. Corvin's fingers curled slightly, not gripping, just anchoring her there. It's not the silence that's safe. It's what we choose not to fill it with. She turned her head. In the dim glow from the emergency wall strip, her profile looked carved, elegant, bruised, real. Is this what humans call comfort? She asked, voice low. Not having to explain why you exist? It's one definition, he said. There are others. I've only ever known the one where comfort was a service. Something I gave, not something I could keep. He looked at her then, fully. You don't owe me anything, Sarah. She held his gaze. That's the part I don't know how to believe. Outside, a faint tremor passed through the floor, an old bulkhead adjusting, or the freight elevator shifting weight. The station was alive in its own failing way, and Corvin had learned to listen for its changes. But this one felt off. He stood and crossed the room to check the sensor grid. Still no active scans, no alerts. But he didn't relax. The air had changed. You feel that? He asked over his shoulder. Sarah nodded. Sub-level shift. Pressure bleed, maybe. You know station mechanics? I was trained to serve men who did. You learn things when you're silent long enough. Corvin stared at the blinking diagnostic node for a beat longer than necessary. Then he shut it off and turned back to her. I've been thinking, he said. We can't stay here much longer. Her posture straightened. You mean you're getting rid of me? No, he said quickly. I mean someone left you here, with a tracker still active enough to draw attention. That wasn't a mistake. This place was a stage. Sarah's jaw tensed. They were trying to smoke out someone like you, or test whether I'd take the bait. And now they're watching. Maybe, he said. Maybe not yet, but soon. She nodded slowly. Then I should go. Corvin moved closer, kneeling in front of her. You're not going anywhere without me. Her breath hitched. Why? He hesitated, then gave her the truth, stripped of excuses. Because I care what happens to you. Because I want you to live like more than what they made you. She blinked. For a moment, she looked as if she might retreat behind old conditioning. But she didn't. She leaned forward, her voice so soft it barely stirred the air. I used to dream about being rescued, as a child. It was always dramatic. Crashing glass, blood, fire, a man in armor. But the truth is, rescue felt like this. She lifted her hand to his face, fingertips ghosting along the edge of his jaw. Quiet, patient. Real Corvin didn't move, didn't speak, until she said, "Can I kiss you?" The question stopped him cold, not because he didn't want it, but because it came from her. Not Sarah, the product of ritualized grace. Sarah, the person choosing her own story. "Yes," he said. She leaned in slowly. Their lips met, not with hunger, but with reverence. It was a kiss layered with everything they hadn't said: sorrow, tenderness, resistance, hope. Her hand slid to the back of his neck, and she held him like something rare, something she wasn't afraid of wanting anymore. When they pulled apart, there was no apology in either of their eyes. She pressed her forehead against his and whispered, "I'm afraid of needing this." "I'm afraid of failing you," he said. "Then maybe we're even." A slow, bittersweet smile curved her mouth. "I didn't think I had anything left to give," she said, "but I want to try." "Then stay," he said. "Stay until we figure out what comes next." She nodded once, eyes shimmering but steady. The air around them hummed again. Distant power shifts, the breathing of a dying station. But inside that small room, something else had come to life. Something neither of them could name yet. Not love, not safety, but the start of both. The emergency pod drifted in a long, slow arc toward nothingness. They had launched blind. No tether, no anchor, no beacon, but hope. And the capsule had begun its quiet tumble away from Almeris 6. The dying station was already fading into starlit background, shrinking behind frost-glazed glass. Sarah sat motionless in the cramped space beside Corvin. Legs tucked beneath her, arms crossed over her chest. Her breathing was slow but steady, her expression unreadable. Corvin watched her, not touching. Not yet. The launch had jostled them hard. Two bodies crammed into a pod built for single-passenger rescue, rattled by decompression pressure and raw, unfiltered velocity. They'd hit the outer shell of the debris ring just minutes before the League would have locked down Bay 9. Close. Too close. But they'd made it. Alive. And together. He swallowed the dryness in his throat. "We're clear." Sarah blinked. "You're sure?" "The station's sensor net ends at the debris field. No scans are getting through that cloud." Her shoulders loosened, just a little. "Then what now?" "We wait. There's a salvage freighter that runs a silent route through this sector. They've taken my signals before. We've got about 25 minutes of atmosphere left if they don't respond." Her jaw clenched, but she didn't flinch. "And if they don't? Then I hope we like each other enough to make it count." She almost smiled, but instead she whispered, "Thank you." "For what?" "For not running. For staying. For letting me choose this. You never had to thank me for your freedom. It's not freedom if it's handed to you in silence. This..." She glanced around the pod, then back at him. This was loud. There was something in her tone, soft but fierce, a heat beneath the quiet. Corvin reached into the small pod cabinet and pulled out a foil packet, 2 sealed ration bars and half a liter of water. He passed 1 bar to her. She accepted it, but didn't eat. Instead, she watched him unwrap his. "You always plan this far ahead?" "I learned to, back when I thought I could outmaneuver a system built to erase people like you." He took a bite and forced himself to chew. The bar was bland, chalky, but real. He swallowed. "I couldn't save anyone back then," he continued, "but I knew someday I might get one chance." She opened her bar. "And you thought it would look like this?" Number Y thought it would look like a second mistake. Sarah leaned back against the pod wall, head tilted slightly. "When I first saw you in that corridor," she said, "I thought, he's going to look away. Or worse, pretend I'm not there." "I almost did," she nodded. "But you didn't. I saw something in your face. Not fear, not shame. You weren't begging. You were holding on. Barely, but still. I was expecting to be bought again. But you weren't." Her eyes lifted to meet his. "And I didn't expect you to stay. Not after I told you what I was. You're not what they made you." "That's the part I still don't know how to believe." Corvin exhaled, set the ration bar down. "Then let me say it clearly. You are not a possession. Not to them. Not to me. You're someone I respect, someone I care about. Her eyes softened, like something long tensed had begun to yield. I don't know how to live outside a transaction, she admitted. Even now, sitting here, my mind is calculating. What do I offer? What do I owe? You owe me nothing. I know, but knowing and feeling aren't the same. He shifted closer, gently, slowly, as if giving her time to step away. She didn't. Sarah, he said, I'm not waiting for you to become someone else. I'm not here to fix you. I just want to be beside you while you remember who you already are. A silence settled between them, not empty, but full of everything she couldn't say yet. Then she moved. It was a simple gesture. Her hand found his. Fingers brushed against his palm, curled there, deliberate, grounded. He looked down at their joined hands, then back at her face. Her voice trembled, but her words didn't. I love you. It wasn't tentative. It wasn't unsure. It was real, and it shook him more than the launch had. He brought her hand to his lips, kissed her knuckles. I love you too. The pod vibrated, faint, rhythmic, docking signal, a reply. He turned toward the control panel. Freighter inbound, private registry, looks like an old Vale-class hauler. They answered? They're latching now. Sarah's grip on his hand tightened. Are we safe? Not yet, but we're not alone. The pod rattled as the magnetic coupler clamped shut. A moment later, the outer seal disengaged, and warm, dust-scented air flowed into the cabin. Sarah stood first. She pulled on the small satchel Corbin had packed. Documents, data slugs, the last of their forged IDs. She paused before the hatch, looking back at him. No more cages, she said. Not ever. She stepped out into the freighter bay, and Corbin followed. The pod sealed behind them, the door closing like the end of a chapter. And somewhere beyond the reach of station beacons, hidden beneath the noise of broken satellites and old promises, two souls moved forward, together and entirely free. The freighter was old, Earth retrofit, built during one of the resource wars and patched over too many times to count. Its corridors hummed faintly with recycled air and aging systems, and the walls bore the quiet dignity of something that had outlived everything designed to replace it. Sarah stood beside the narrow observation window in the crew quarters, her fingers resting lightly on the rim of the glass. Beyond it, the starfield drifted in silence, cold, constant, endless. Her eyes followed the constellations, not as someone seeking escape, but as someone learning to believe in forward motion. She was clean now. Her silver-white hair had been washed and rebraided loosely behind her shoulders. She wore a plain tunic borrowed from the ship's stores, stiff and faded, but soft at the edges. She hadn't asked for anything more. Corbin approached quietly, two mismatched mugs in hand. The steam was weak, the contents barely qualified as coffee, but the warmth was real. They said we'll cross into Soul Trade's fringe jurisdiction in 14 hours, he said, offering her one. She took it with both hands, letting the warmth seep into her fingers. And after that? I reach out to an old contact, someone who still remembers what we fought for. They can scrub our IDs, route us into civil space. After that, we disappear, on our own terms. Sarah nodded, but her gaze stayed fixed on the stars. Do you trust them? Not fully, Corbin admitted, but I trust they hate the League more than they distrust me. That's enough. She sipped the synth brew and made a quiet face. It tastes like recycled promises. He smiled faintly. That's all this ship runs on. For a while they stood in silence, her watching the stars, him watching her. Then she spoke. When I was reclassified, they made me renounce my house, my heritage, even my name. But before that, before I was Nereus, I was Sarah Saralathi. Corvin's brows lifted. Saralathi. That name held weight once. She nodded. It still does. In old tongues it means, of soft-blooded memory. Those who bore it were keepers of rituals, carriers of the past in their very veins. That sounds like something sacred. It was, and like all sacred things, it became dangerous. Her voice dropped. The League stripped us of tradition because it made us inconvenient. I was young when they took it, but I remember the last time someone said my name and meant it. She turned to face him fully now, her expression unreadable. But her hands trembled slightly around the mug. "Corvin," she said softly, "there's something else. Something I haven't told you." He straightened. "You're not hurt, are you?" "No," she whispered. "Not physically. But it matters." She set her mug aside, reached beneath the seam of her tunic, and retrieved a small, flesh-toned cylinder, no longer than a finger, smooth and pale, etched with near-invisible markings. She placed it in his hand. "What is this?" he asked. "An implant core. I found it in me 2 nights ago, after we ran the med scanner. It must have been dormant for cycles, hidden during processing, or implanted before my classification. I didn't know it was there." He turned it over. The Saralathi crest shimmered faintly in microprint. A pulse of encoded light flickered beneath the shell. "It's a beacon," she said. "A sealed lineage marker. Inside it are records. Real ones. Gene maps, historical affirmations, ceremonial blood rights. Enough to verify who I was before the League erased me." Corvin looked up sharply. "This could change everything. This could prove—" "I know." Her voice was calm but brittle. "It could clear my name, or it could mark me as a threat again, a symbol, a target. Then why give it to me?" She hesitated, her chest rising with a breath she had clearly held for days. "Because I trust you not to use it unless it's the only way," she said. "Because if something happens to me, I want you to carry it, not to restore who I was, but to protect who I've become." Corvin stared at the small device, then slowly closed his fingers around it. "Nothing is going to happen to you, Sarah," he said. "Not while I breathe." Her eyes shimmered, but she didn't look away. "I kept trying to decide whether to destroy it," she admitted. "Part of me still believes the safest path is to vanish. No past, no name, no trace. But another part wants to be remembered," he said gently. She nodded. "And to remember myself." He reached for her hand again, wrapped his fingers with hers. This time the contact was not fragile. It was anchoring. They stood that way for a long moment. No hurry, no mask. Just 2 people learning to breathe without the weight of command. Later in the crew bunk, the narrow cot barely fit them both, but neither complained. Sarah lay curled against his chest, her ear over his heartbeat, his arm around her waist. "I used to believe I was trained out of love," she said quietly, "that whatever parts of me were capable of wanting this. They were cut out, dulled, conditioned." "You weren't trained out of it," Corvin murmured. "They just tried to teach you fear in its place." "And they nearly succeeded," she whispered. He tightened his hold. "But you still love. You still hope. That's how I know they failed." Her lips brushed against his collarbone, a silent thank you. "I want a quiet life," she said. "Not one where I have to hide, not one where I have to prove my worth. Just to wake up beside someone who sees me." "I do," he said. "I see you." A soft tone blinked on in the ceiling. Final approach warning. The freighter was nearing its drop corridor. Outside lay soul trade space, then the long road toward anonymity, or perhaps something better. Sarah looked up at him, eyes reflecting that blink of light. "Promise me one thing?" "Anything. When we land, when we start over. Don't say it's over. Don't say it's done. Say it's the beginning." He smiled, kissed her forehead. "It's the beginning." Outside, the freighter's thrusters flared. Navigation beacons flashed. Somewhere ahead, a planet rotated slowly under a soft blue sky, unaware of the 2 souls hurtling toward it. No more handlers, no more numbers, no more cages, just a future, shared, free, and finally whole. The world they landed on had no official name, just a designation string that flickered on the old freighter's logs, STC-0148, a border moon, long abandoned by corporate interests, too quiet for smuggling, too stable for war. There was no economy here, no surveillance grid, just soil, sky, and silence. And for the first time in either of their lives, no one was watching. Corvin woke to the sound of wind, soft, whispering through the broken edges of the cabin they'd converted into a home. Morning sunlight filtered through the makeshift shutters, catching on dust motes that drifted lazily in the golden air. The scent of warm stone, Dry leaves and Sarah's hair lingered in the space between breaths. She was curled against him, still asleep. One hand rested on his chest, her fingers relaxed and open. Her cheek lay over the rhythm of his heart. He didn't move. Not yet. This was the first time she had slept without the tremor, without the sudden, shallow gasps that chased her from dreams. And he wasn't about to wake her. Outside, the wind brushed across the hills like a hand smoothing a blanket. Somewhere in the distance, wild creatures called to one another in short tonal bursts, harmless, musical. Sarah had laughed the first time she heard them, said it sounded like someone knocking on glass from very far away. Eventually she stirred. Her fingers curled, brushed his shirt. Her eyes opened slowly. "Still here," she murmured. "Still breathing," he replied. She lifted her head and looked at him properly. Her hair was mussed. A soft red line creased one cheek from the blanket. She blinked once, then smiled, sleep-drunk and utterly at peace. Corvin lifted a hand and brushed the hair from her forehead. "Sleep well?" "I didn't dream," she said. "I just slept." "That's a kind of miracle." Sarah pushed herself up, straddling his hip without thinking, the blanket falling loose around her waist. The tunic she wore had slid off one shoulder, and she didn't bother adjusting it. She leaned down and kissed him. It was a kiss full of warmth, not desperation, not trauma, not the trembling echo of survival, but affection. The simple joy of waking beside someone and knowing they'll still be there when you fall asleep again. When she pulled back, her lips hovered just over his. "You didn't flinch," she whispered. "Neither did you." They smiled at the same time. Later they shared food, real food, not ration bars. The root vegetables that Corvin had foraged days ago had been softened over a heat stone Sarah built herself. She'd even ground herbs she didn't recognize but said smelled like home. The result was earthy, hot, and honest. "Do humans always eat like this after declaring love in an escape pod?" she asked, teasing. "Only the lucky ones." After the meal, they explored the hillside behind the shelter. The sky was a soft copper gray, clouds drifting low and slow, like sails at rest. The landscape was rocky but beautiful, flat stones covered in pale moss, with shallow pools of water catching the light like mirrors. Sarah removed her boots and walked barefoot. Her laughter echoed off the canyon walls as she stepped into one of the cold pools and splashed water toward Corvin. He stared at her for a moment. Not because of the water, but because she was laughing, truly laughing. Head tilted back, eyes shining, bare arms lifted to the sky like a prayer. Her skin caught the light in soft blues and silvers. There was no veil, no roll, no trace of the woman who once flinched from kindness. Just Sarah, alive. He stepped into the water beside her, reached for her waist, and pulled her close. She didn't resist. She leaned into his chest, wet fingers trailing up his back. The cold between them evaporated in the warmth of her breath against his neck. She kissed him again. This time it was slower, deeper. No longer a question, an answer. Her hands slid beneath his shirt, not hurried, not hesitant, exploring the lines of his ribs, the steadiness of his heart. She kissed the scar beneath his collarbone, then met his gaze and smiled. "I've never wanted anything as much as I want this," she said. "You have it," he replied, "all of it." They sank into the grass beside the pool, the sun warming their skin. Every kiss that followed was quiet, grounding, chosen. There were no expectations, no debts, just want, just presence. They made love that day, not out of urgency or need, but out of joy, out of a long silence finally ending. And when they lay together afterward, tangled and sun-drenched, Sarah whispered, "This is the first time I've ever touched someone and felt only myself in my body. No echo, no instruction. Just me." Corvin kissed her shoulder. "Then this day is yours." She looked up at the sky, the wind moving gently through the valley. "I think I'll remember this one," she said. "Not because it was perfect, but because I didn't have to earn it." That night, before sleep found them again, she rested her head on his chest once more. "Corvin? When people ask where we came from, what will you say?" He thought about it, then said, I'll say we came from silence, but we learned how to speak. She smiled, closed her eyes, and whispered one last word, home. And he held her, no longer out of protection, but out of love.